Tom, thank you for taking the time to speak to us today, and congratulations on placing in the top 3 of Tempo's Super Startups list. It'd be great for you to start with introducing yourself.
Sure. I'm Tom Denny, and I'm the head of people at Codat.
What do you think contributed to making Codat one of the most exciting places to work, and why they ended up on our list?
Oh, it's a big question. I think that Codat, I joke, is the most exciting startup you've never heard of. I think that our brand is getting out there more and more as we grow, which is really exciting to see. But what I think makes us an exciting company, and hopefully one of the reasons why we featured in the list, is we're doing something that's not being done before in the financial markets. We started the business very much with an idea of having a problem that needed to be solved, rather than finding some sort of shiny piece of technology like AI or machine learning and thinking, let's try and find a product market fit. We knew what problems there were in the market, and we were building a product to solve it straight away. I think that's meant that we've had a really powerful and exciting journey over the last 5 years. And it means that there's no real ceiling for our growth. We still have no global competitors. There's still no one really doing exactly what we're doing. And that makes it a really exciting place to be, because you know that the work that you're doing is directly impacting a wider industry that nobody else is affecting in the same way.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said there. And if you had to pinpoint an exact moment or time in which you felt most proud about Codat and the way in which it was able to exhibit its culture, what moment would that be for you?
I think broadly it was kind of the way that we handled the pandemic, which I'm sure loads of people are talking about, and I don't want to kind of dwell on COVID as a thing, but I was super proud of us as a business entering the kind of lockdown in March 2020 as only about 42 people, and kind of coming out in 2021 over 100 people, which was super exciting to see growth through an incredibly difficult year for many, many businesses. I think if I was to pinpoint a single moment that kind of made me the most proud, it was at the end of an interview that we were doing with a candidate. We, as a team, as a people team, do what we call kind of hosting interviews. So we will do something at the start and at the end of every interview, as if you'd kind of come in to the office to see us. We kind of jump in on these virtual calls in that way. And I was wrapping up an interview with a candidate, and they said that they was incredibly impressed about how they had been able to kind of pick up and observe what the culture of the company was like, even through a virtual interview with the 2 people that they'd met in that interview for that day. I didn't tell them at the time, but that made me incredibly proud, because the 2 people that they had been interviewed by had both joined us virtually, remotely from home during the pandemic. They'd never met each other. They'd never met any from the team. And they had already picked up and absorbed our culture through all of the company conversations, the meetings, the hangouts that we were doing, and then already kind of projecting that culture onto future prospective employees. So that made me incredibly proud, and kind of almost still makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up by thinking about it. Yeah,
that's really amazing to hear. So is there anything specifically that you changed or focused on in the onboarding process to make sure your culture was retained?
Honestly, we didn't do anything differently, really. We just translated everything to virtual. So we have an extensive onboarding process where everyone who joins the business gets to spend at least an hour with every key stakeholder at the business within their first week. We think it's super important that you kind of understand what the company does, how our product functions, who we're selling it to, how we build it, how we support it, and so that everybody kind of understands exactly where they fit in by the end of week 1. We were doing that in person by having meetings and conversations in the office. We just moved those to virtual hangouts, did it as a big group as we kind of increased the amount of people we were onboarding each week. And the effect stayed the same. The response and the feedback was that it was still as excellent as it had been, sometimes perhaps even better, because you were able to get a little bit more interactive because it was virtual and everyone was kind of in a similar situation rather than maybe just being another person in a big room. So I think that worked really well for us. I think that hosting the interviews has been a huge impact for us, and it's something that even though many of us are back in offices now, we've continued to do, because we're still doing a lot of remote interviews. And we regularly get feedback from candidates that nobody else is doing that still. So that makes me really excited that we're still kind of staying ahead of the game in terms of how we're treating candidate experience. I think that then translates into kind of representing us as a business about how we care about the people that are joining the business. We care about the journey they go through when they interview with us, and then we care about how their onboarding experience is. So I think that's worked a lot. I think for me, the kind of the worst situation would be is that a startup or a technology business makes it seem super exciting, super shiny through an interview process, kind of sells the dream, and then you join and it's an absolute shambles because nobody's really thought about processes or what onboarding looks like. So for me, I want to make sure that by the end of either day one or week one, that everybody who's joining Codat is thinking, yeah, I definitely made the right choice joining this business. This is exactly what I hoped it was going to be. You know, everything they told me that was going to be the case is the case.
Yeah, no surprises, and just, the culture is exactly how it says on the tin. So you touched on before about that experience you had with a candidate who reflected on their interview process and how the culture really shined through. So how do you make sure that people at all levels exhibit your culture at Codat?
I think that the most important thing at Codat is that our structure is as flat as it can be. So actually, someone being a head of department and someone being a junior member of the team really makes no difference for us in terms of representing our values, demonstrating culture. Everybody is operating exactly the same way. The office is incredibly open. We don't have offices for our founders. Everybody sits amongst each other, regardless of your role or your seniority. So I would expect everybody to kind of just represent Codat in the same way, and they do. I think the important thing for us is that we're a very collaborative company. We do a lot of cross-functional work through different teams and different departments. So the team kind of embrace that wholeheartedly, and we're very communicative, we're very transparent. We think one of the lessons that we learned through the pandemic was the necessity to over-communicate. Anything less than over-communication isn't good enough. And I think that's worked really well in kind of us coming back into an office environment. People just kind of talk and communicate all the time about lots of things. And that's become a massive part of Codat culture. The kind of flip side of Codat culture is very much around being sociable. We're very, very focused. We're very driven as a team, and we take our work very seriously. But at the same time, we don't take ourselves too seriously. So we really enjoy socializing as a business. And again, seniority makes no difference here. The team lead may drive a social event, or a junior member might suggest going to the pub. It doesn't matter for us. It's about kind of having that open environment where anyone can do anything. So I think it's a good question, and I'll probably give you an annoying answer, is that actually there isn't a real answer to that. Codat is just kind of very open, and everybody represents the culture equally. Yeah,
so no need to kind of foster anything specific, I guess, on that end of making sure that it's incorporated across all levels. And I guess thinking about it in another vertical where you are expanding into the US and hopefully other markets as well very soon, how conscious are you of retaining a certain kind of culture there, or how are you going to adopt that culture, or are there any learnings that you've found so far? Yeah, so I think we opened an office in New York in September last year, and I think that one of the most important things that we did was that we relocated several members of the London team to New York. So I think we moved about 3 or 4 people, different seniorities. That part really didn't make a difference, but they were helped kind of build the foundation of what that team and that culture out there looked like. I just had the pleasure of spending 2 weeks with the team in New York, and the thing that made me kind of laugh the most was that when speaking to the team, they were very adamant about having great culture that shouldn't be changed, and we shouldn't be trying to kind of come over from London and be like, this is how New York culture should be. But what they clearly don't realize, and they hopefully will realize when they come over here, is that the culture is identical. We've done very well in kind of translating it over. So what they've got there is exactly the same as it is here. It's great. They're all an amazing bunch of people. And I think, a lot of that's come from us putting the right people there first, and then adopting exactly the same hiring practices about how we identify the best talent. We've hired incredibly well, just like we do here in London. It makes no difference really. So that's worked really well for us. If you were to give a piece of advice or a lot of advice to a startup or scale up on how to best retain their culture and the key things to think about, what would that be?
We did very slow scaling for the first few years. So when we started kind of going through our real growth phase, the team was only about maybe 25, 30 people. And almost the entirety of those people had been with us for kind of somewhere between 1 and 3 years. So what's been great, and as a part of that is, without knowing the exact numbers off the top of my head, I would guess something like 95% of those people are still with us today. So that's helped build a kind of a foundation of what life at Codat is like. Now, what's brilliant, and it's not necessarily by design, but probably by the fact that we hire amazing people, is majority of people have progressed and developed and stepped into leadership positions and are now leading teams or functions. So they are able to project and show what life at Codat is like, what the culture of the company is like for all the people that are joining the company today. So what that's meant is, yes, we've hired 100 people this year, and a lot of those people have therefore been with us for well under a year, but they are always interacting with or working directly with people who have been with the company for far longer. So those people are great at showing how we behave, what kind of operating within our functions look like, how we work cross-functionally, or we communicate with other parts of the business, so that people kind of pick that up, they absorb, and then they do it themselves.
I guess on that side of things then, what are some of those values that you look for in ideal candidates for Codat?
I think the biggest one for us is curiosity. And it kind of manifests in many different ways, but it's been certainly one of the biggest things that we look for, or that we have found, that we have kind of spotted or found within brilliant candidates, is those that show true curiosity. So whether that be really wanting to understand the market we're operating in, or wanting to know more about how our product is solving these problems, or understand more about how the teams work, or ask lots of really big, bold questions during interview processes. It's those people who either demonstrate they've done loads of prep and research, or really want to know more, and they get this kind of twinkle in their eye about, tell me more, I want to know more about your product or your business or what it's like to work there. Those people always tend to be the best and do the best at Codat. I think that something that made us very strong as a business is that we always put people first when we make decisions. We have a phrase that sounds maybe a bit silly, or could be passed off as in a bit of a blasé way, but we always say that we treat the team like the grown-ups that they are. Now, that sounds silly, but I think that many of us can relate to working for companies where that isn't the case. People get lost behind processes or rules or structure. They forget kind of the human element and the nature of making a decision. So, we as a business, and certainly we as a people team, often are asking the question, is this a decision that's treating the team like grown-ups? And that, again, fosters itself in many different ways, through trust, belief that people will do their best work because we've hired the best people to do that role. We scale in a way where we say, I need someone to do something better than I can. I've surrounded myself in the people team by people who are far more experienced than I am, because I need that. We need that as a business. Some companies don't do that. They feel like, I'm leading this team, so I've got to find someone who's less experienced, so they have to report to me, or they have to take instruction, which we think is silly. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our decisions are made in that way, and I think that by treating the team in that way and being very people-orientated, people first, it means that we've, again, built this culture that's hard to define, but makes it a very enjoyable and hardworking and driven environment.
Mm-hmm. And one, I guess, that's quite adaptable, because it's based off of how you can learn from other people and that constant kind of learning from those who join the team. And,
Absolutely. Yeah. We kind of say that every hire we make should be better than the last. Now, we're 200 employees in. That feels like it's getting challenging because we've got amazing people. But really, what that looks like is having absolutely no compromise policy in terms of our hiring. So we will, well, I was going to say happily, maybe not happily miss deadlines or timelines because we haven't got the right people in the team or on board, but we would rather wait to find the right person than make a short-sighted bad hire, regret it just to try and deliver something within a month rather than 2 months. So what that means is that everybody that has made it into the business is amazing. They totally get it. They're very intelligent, very driven. They really invest themselves into the business and the product and the work that they're doing. So that makes it a really exciting environment to work in. You're surrounded by people who are inspirational, and on many occasions I often feel like I'm learning on a daily basis about different things around the business or outside worldly things, or even things about myself from overhearing conversations or having conversations with a team in different functions, because they're all amazing people. So that's makes it a great place to be. Yeah, for sure. And I guess leading on from that, how important would you say that having a bit more of a rigid or structured diversity and inclusion program, including that in your hiring processes, how important would you say that is? Yeah, I think it's very important to be conscious and purposeful with how you approach hiring in terms of diversity. We operate in two incredibly difficult markets, being financial services and technology, which are heavily male orientated, and most candidates come from very common backgrounds, which tends to lead them to being very similar types of people. For us, the way that we've decided to be purposeful with how we approach diverse hiring is not to change the end decision. We will always hire the best person that we can find for the role. What we want to do, certainly as a talent team, is enable ourselves to widen the top of the funnel pipeline as much as we possibly can by either looking at specific requirements or removing specific requirements, looking at behavioural-based interview questions rather than experience-based interview questions, being flexible as an employer to enable things like remote working, part-time working, working from home regularly, to facilitate or enable anyone who requires certain flexibility within their day-to-day work. And then hopefully that enables us to get as many diverse candidates into our pipeline, so that as we go through our processes, we give ourselves a great shot at hiring diverse talent as the best person to hire for that role. Once they're in the business, being inclusive is obviously super important as well. It's something that we're constantly working on, constantly looking to improve. I'll be the first person to hold my hands up and say we can do better. I think we've done great over the last year at looking at improving those areas and being, again, very purposeful. We've introduced core KPIs now to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable, and also looking at everybody in the business to be accountable as well. It doesn't come down to one individual person to create diversity at a business. It's all of us all together to be diverse and to be inclusive. So we are putting things in place to help create that level of accountability and expand the wider functionality as a business about how we can look at all those sorts of things. And if you were to set one intention or goal for Codat going into 2022 in one or two sentences, what would it be? Growth is the biggest thing for us. We are at a point now where we're almost doubling in size year on year. We've just past the 200 person mark, which was amazing, a super milestone to pass. Our aim is to reach almost 400 people by the end of 2022. So that's a lot of work. It's a little daunting, but it's incredibly exciting. And I think that there are a lot of things that have to be focused on when it comes to looking at that growth. Diversity being one of those. We've increased our gender diversity percentage in 2021 by 10%. Doing 10% again in 2022 when you're hiring twice the number of people is just twice as hard. So it's going to be a challenge, but something that the whole team are ready and raring to do. Thanks, Tom, for joining us today and for talking more about Codat's culture. Exciting times for you ahead, and look forward to catching up with you again soon. Thank you for having me.